السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. I am assistant lecturer لمياء هادي. Our lab today, I talk about the practical embryology of the GIT, respiratory and renal system. First slide, transfer sections in the chick embryo, 72 hours. In this sections show transfer sections in the chick embryo. You can see this is the neural tube in that side and another neural tube in the another side. This is the diencephalon and this is the myelencephalon, neuromeres of myelencephalon. Also in the transfer sections you can see this is the ear vesicles or otic vesicles, otocysts. Also in these sections show interiorly ear vesicles. This ganglia is called the acousticofacialis ganglia. Interiorly ear vesicles, acousticofacialis ganglia. More interiorly acousticofacialis, this is called trigeminal ganglia or semilunar ganglia, while caudally of the ear vesicles here, this is the 9th and 10th cranial nerve, 9th and 10th cranial nerve. This is the cardinal vein. Interiorly ear vesicles, acousticofacialis ganglia. More interiorly trigeminal ganglia. Caudal ear vesicles, 9th and 10th cranial nerve. Here in these sections, more caudally, here in these sections you can see this is the dorsal aorta, lateral dorsal aorta, cardinal vein in that side and in that side. Ventral to the dorsal aorta, gut tube. This is the foregut, and ventral to the dorsal aorta, hard loop diverticulum, and the cavity of the heart tube is called the pericardial cavity. Also in these sections, transverse sections, you can see a diencephalon and an optic cup derived from the optic vesicles. And also you can see lens vesicles and optic stalk, later forming optic nerve. more caudally you can see dorsally, this is the neural tube. Ventral to the neural tube, notochord. You can see this is the loose tissue surrounded the neural tube, and a notochord is called the sclerotome, while a dense tissue, the dermomyotome. Dorsally, neural tube. Ventral to it, notochord. Ventral notochord, a dorsal aorta. Ventral, a dorsal aorta, الفورجات. Here you can see الفورجات beginning to divided by constrictions into ventral respiratory diverticulum and dorsally esophagus. And ventral to the gut tube, heart. This is the heart. Esophagus, respiratory diverticulum. Here in these sections also you can see a single dorsal aorta and ventral to the dorsal aorta. This is the foregut. Foregut beginning to divided by constrictions into ventral, the respiratory diverticulum, and dorsally esophagus. Ventral foregut, this heart. Heart loop. Cavity of the heart is called the pericardial cavity. And you can see here the thickening of the ectoderm is called the olfactory placode. That will be invaginated from the olfactory pit. A thickening of the ectodermal forming the olfactory placode, later forming olfactory pit. Neural tube. Esophagus, respiratory diverticulum. Cavity when the gut tube and the respiratory is called the a pleural cavity. Here in these sections, also dorsally neural tube, ventral to it notochord, sclerotome surrounded the neural tube and the notochord, a dermomyotome, ventral notochord, dorsal aorta, lateral dorsal aorta, a cardinal vein, ventral to the dorsal aorta, a gut tube, and a gut tube or foregut suspended by a dorsal mesentery in the dorsal. In the ventral, this is the ventral mesentery. Ventral, gut tube, heart, and cavity of the heart is called the pericardial cavity. And here you can see this is the olfactory pit from the olfactory placode. Olfactory placode invaginated, forming the olfactory pit. Heart loop, pericardial cavity, ventral mesentery, dorsal mesentery, and this is the pleural cavity. Dorsal aorta, cardinal vein, notochord, sclerotome, dermomyotome, neural tube. The same of these structures could be seen in any embryo transfer sections. Here is second slide, transfer sections in the pig embryo, 10 millimeter. Here in these structures you can see two parts of the neural tube. Here this is the neuromeres of the myelencephalon and mesencephalon. The wall of the each neural plate consists of the neuroepithelial, mantle zone, and marginal zone. The other side of the neural tube, this is the rhombencephalic isthmus, and this is the midbrain or mesencephalon, round structures, while the diencephalon elongated structures. Also you can see the wall, neuroepithelial, mantle zone, and marginal zone. Also in transverse sections in the pig embryo you can see the ear vesicles or the otic vesicle or the otocyst. This is the cardinal vein. Interiorly, the ear vesicles, these structures is ganglia, that the acoustico-facialis ganglia. Interiorly, the ear vesicles, the ganglia is called acoustico-facialis ganglia. المore anteriorly acoustico-facialis. This is called trigeminal ganglia or semilunar ganglia. While الcaudally ear vesicle here, الcaudally of the ear vesicles, this is the 9th and the 10th cranial nerve. 9 and the 10th cranial nerve. الcaudally للإير vesicles 9th and 10th cranial nerve, while anteriorly acoustico-facialis ganglia. more anteriorly acoustico-facialis, this is the trigeminal ganglia, and this the cardinal vein. more caudally in the same slide, also dorsally neural tube. You can see the neuroepithelial, mantle zone, basal mantle zone, and marginal zone. Also you can see these structures is called spinal ganglia or spinal root ganglia. Here spinal ganglia, ventral to the neural tube, notochord. Notochord is smaller than the notochord in the chick embryo, and ventral to the notochord the bilateral dorsal aorta. lateral dorsal aorta, cardinal vein, and ventral to the dorsal aorta, gut. This is the pharynx, and this is the pharyngeal arch, and this is the pharyngeal pouch, and this is the aortic arch. From the ectoderm, the outside, pharyngeal cleft, pharyngeal arch, pharyngeal cleft, pharyngeal pouch, and aortic arch. Pharynx, bilateral dorsal aorta, cardinal vein, basal mantle zone, spinal ganglia. Also, in the more caudally, dorsally, neural tube, spinal cord, narrow cavity, and you can see the basal mantle zone and the spinal ganglia. Ventral to the neural tube, notochord. Ventral to the notochord, a dorsal aorta, bilateral dorsal aorta. Lateral dorsal aorta, a cardinal vein. Ventral dorsal aorta, a foregut. Here you can see two tubes in the foregut. Dorsally, esophagus, and ventrally, trachea, and the septum separated or divided the foregut. Is called the tracheoesophageal septum here, that divided the foregut to a dorsally esophagus and ventrally trachea. Okay, esophagus, tracheoesophageal septum, and trachea. Again, a dorsally neural tube, basal mantle zone, a dorsal root ganglia, ventral to the neural tube, the notochord, ventral to the notochord. This is the dorsal aorta, and this is the cardinal vein. Here you can see the renal systems is beginning to formations. Ventral to the dorsal aorta, gut. You can see this is the dorsal mesentery, and this is the ventral mesentery, and this is the esophagus. Here you can see the respiratory diverticulum is divided into main bronchi. Neural tube, ventral to it notochord, ventral to it single dorsal aorta, and this is the renal systems formations. Ventral to the dorsal aorta, gut tube. Here you can see esophagus and two main bronchi, and this is the dorsal mesentery, and this is the dorsal ventral mesentery, dorsal mesentery and ventral mesentery. Also you can see this is the renal formations, beginning to the formations mesonephric tubules, and this is the dorsal mesentery, ventral mesentery, the esophagus, and the main bronchi of the lung. Ventral to the ventral mesentery, you can see these structures, liver, and the liver containing to the a large duct. This duct is called the ductus venosus, and also you can see sinusoidal of the liver. Ventral gut tube, this is heart, and the cavity of the heart, the pericardial cavity, and the cavity from the foregut, and a respiratory pleural cavity. Again, in more caudally, neural tube, notochord, dorsal aorta. On the side of the dorsal aorta, you can see this is the renal systems. This structure is called mesonephric glomeruli, and these the mesonephric tubules. Glomeruli, tubules, and this is the mesonephric duct. Ventral to the dorsal aorta, gut. Here, gut representing by stomach, wider lumen, and in the foregut containing to the dorsal mesentery and the ventral mesentery. Ventral mesentery, liver, and you can see a large duct of the liver. This is the ductus venosus. Also you can see the inferior cardinal vein behind the liver. The cavity of the renal systems, the peritoneal cavity. Okay. Again, mesonephric glomeruli, mesonephric tubules, mesonephric duct, dorsal mesentery, stomach, ventral mesentery, liver, sinusoid of the liver, ductus venosus, inferior cardinal vein, and peritoneal cavity. You can see this is the large duct of the liver, ductus venosus, and you can see the sinusoid of the liver, ventral mesentery, the stomach, and this is the inferior vena cava, dorsal mesentery, mesonephric glomeruli, mesonephric tubules, mesonephric duct, and peritoneal cavity. Also again, neural tube, ventral to it notochord, ventral to it the dorsal aorta. Here you can see clearly the renal systems. This is the mesonephric glomeruli, and this is the mesonephric tubules. mesonephric glomeruli, mesonephric tubules, mesonephric duct. Also in these sections you can see الهاند gut containing to the dorsal mesentery only. الهاند gut has a dorsal mesentery only. This is the dorsal mesentery of the intestinal. And the cavity of the renal systems, peritoneal cavity. Thank you.